Back in 1994 was when I first got my hands on a cassette 4-track. It'll be a few more years until I get one of my very own, but to be able to knock up a multi-track demo with one of my bandmates from home was just unbelievable. Fast forward 30 years to 2024, and I think it's fair to say quite a lot has changed in home recording. But this video is all about the advantages of home studio recording back then in the mid-90s, what we can learn from it and how we can apply it to modern productions in 2024. Let's dive straight in. So 4 tracks, the clue's kind of in the title. You've got 4 tracks to work with. Yes, you can bounce tracks, but anyone that's used a 4-track cassette recorder knows when you start bouncing on this thin, tiny little bit of tape, things get sketchy and pretty phasey pretty quickly. But what it does do is it encourages a 4-track mindset. It really makes you think about that production, really makes you think about the arrangements and each track and instrument, and forces you to get as much as you possibly can out of each one. 4 tracks are really well suited, especially laying down demos to drums, bass, guitar and vocals, and it really makes you think about mic placement too, something that I know we can get a bit sloppy with modern home studio recordings where we think, we'll work it out later in the mix. When you're working with a cassette 4-track, you really want to get as much right as possible when you're laying it down, because your mixing options are pretty limited. Fast forward 30 years to 2024 and we've literally got virtually unlimited tracks to work with. Back then in 94, that would have just been unbelievable to even fathom. So everything's great, right? Well, that's not always the case. Certainly over the last decade, let's say, when I've been freelancing, I've experienced and been sent quite a lot of confused projects where it doesn't feel like anyone's really making any decisions, projects which have got lots of multiple mics and no one's actually chosen the one which they feel represents the sound they're looking for. And this leads, say, to a freelance mixer having to make a decision on the sound of the artist, which I feel should really be done by the artist at the recording stage, because that's your sound, that's the sound of you. You don't want someone else to be making a decision on what you sound like. So if you want to learn from home recording in 1994 and apply it to 2024, I would definitely say limiting the number of tracks you work with is a great idea, but imposing those limitations is going to make you really work at the arrangement and at your production. And make sure that you've got a really good idea about your defined sound too. Don't leave it down to somebody else to make that decision. Let's go back to 1994, and if you want to get your band recorded on a multi-track in your home studio, then people are going to have to come to your home studio. They're not going to be able to dial it in. They're not going to be able to send it over via email. They need to come over and get their tracks laid down in person. You're going to have to talk to them. You're going to have to smell them. You're going to have to get along with them. You're probably going to argue with them. You're going to have to listen to their point of view. But ultimately it means that your band's going to have to get together. You're going to be with other people interacting. You're going to have plenty of laughs and you're going to have a good time. It's going to be really bonding for your band, and it's also going to be really beneficial for the music and your experience. Now, back in 94, we didn't really talk very much about mental health, but one thing was for sure is that getting together and recording together and being friends together and achieving together was definitely good for it. Let's fast forward to 2024, where so many of us are working on our own with no windows in darkened rooms, producing for long periods of time, seeking perfection, not having very many people to bounce off, if anybody at all. We've got big spikes in anxiety and depression, and mental health is a big buzzword now, and we're all very aware of it. Here's a quote from Mick Fleetwood from Fleetwood Mac when he was talking about modern recording practices, and he said, yeah, sure, you could record Rumours and Tango in the Night, you could do these albums on your own with enough time and enough expertise and knowledge and gear and skill and ability. You could sit on your own and you could churn that one out with enough persistence, but you wouldn't have nearly as much fun as Fleetwood Mac did back then in the day. And it does kind of beg the question, what is making music really all about when it comes down to it? You know, I think what we can learn from working back in the mid-90s and bring it forward to now in the mid-20s is that we should all try to get together more, make music more together, and try to avoid sitting on our own for really long periods of time with no interaction or interacting through a screen, chasing a perfection which we all know doesn't exist. If you're enjoying this video, here's something that nobody did back in 1994, but I really appreciate it if you did it right now in 2024, and that's like and subscribe here on YouTube. Back in the 90s, when it came to competition, you would know your local scene, you'd probably know the musicians that you went to school with, and in turn those musicians would get into bands. You'd have quite a healthy band scene wherever you lived. There was a lot of bands around that time because Britpop was just about to boom, and there was a lot of interest in live music. But you knew the scene and you were amongst the scene and part of it. A lot of your friends would be musicians, and as I say, a lot of people that you met through school and colleges and universities would go on to perform your network of friends of musicians. And the only other musicians and bands really that you would have been aware of would have been those ones that had made it, those that you might have bought their CD or even their cassette tape or their vinyl. A little bit later you might even buy their mini disc. But the acts that were in the charts that you might be a fan of, and you'd learn about them through TV and through mass media, through magazines, newspapers, that kind of stuff. But my point here is, when it comes to looking over your shoulder at competition, aside from a healthy band scene and acts that were aspirational, that had made it, that you were aiming towards, that you looked up to and thought, I'd like a slice of that, competition is healthy. It's at an achievable level, and you know, when it came to a band rivalry, everything felt quite healthy within a scene, and it felt really like within a scene bands were really benefiting from a little bit of positive competitive rivalry. Now back in 2024, and things really couldn't have changed much more. You're on YouTube, say you play guitar and you sing, you can access hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people doing the same thing across the world. It can really make you feel like, what's the point in adding another song into the world? Do people really need another singer and a guitarist? It can make you feel not as special as you 100% are. Imposter syndrome is bigger than ever, certainly in our industry, where people are looking over their shoulder unnaturally, being able to see all of these people which normally you wouldn't see at all. You would have been in a small scene like you were back in the 90s. You would have known the other people in the competition, and it would have been far more healthy than it is now to look at facts and statistics and numbers and subscribers and followers and feel like, look, I've only got 10 followers and this person's got 1 million, so do I really have any value? Is it worth me carrying on? So what can you do about that? You have the power to turn it off, turn the noise off, and invest your time sooner in yourself, bettering yourself, becoming a better musician. Sure, be competitive with yourself, and remember that you make music, you started making music because you love making music, not because you want to have more numbers than the next guy. And if you want to invest some time right now in your home studio skills, I've got a free producer Kickstarter bundle. It features all the best stuff that I've created and given away for free, and you can grab it for free right now below this video. Now, if a few of your 4-track recordings came out really well, you might start thinking with your band back in the mid-90s that it might be worth getting into a recording studio to get the recordings to the next level. That's going to involve a fair chunk of money, and you're probably going to book in a 3 or 4 hour session to get the recording done, and maybe a separate mixing session. What this meant was, one, you're going to have to prepare really well and get really organized, but you're also going to have to work to a deadline, because when that time limit is up, that's when it's done. And when it comes to booking out recording studios, time equals money. Now in 2024, once again, things couldn't really be much more different. Listen, time is still your most precious commodity, but you can work on a project for a day, a week, a month, a year, or years. That sounds great, right? Yes, but the problem often here is with no set deadlines, with no positive pressure, what we can often do is procrastinate on a project, which can leave lots and lots of songs never reaching completion. Also with no definitive end point, like when your money might run out in the recording studio and there's no more hours booked in, so that's when it's done and it's pressed and it's finished and completed. It can feel in a home recording studio right now in 2024 that you're always trying to chase getting it better and better and better. You're trying to tweak endlessly to reach an elusive perfection which doesn't exist. So how can you avoid that ever maddening production spiral and work much more like someone would have done in the mid-90s? set yourself a deadline. When it's done, it's done. Finish it, export it, upload it, release it, move on. You will find that not only you feel a lot better, you get a lot more done, but also it's a much better way to progress your learning and knowledge. You will learn a lot more working on the next project than you will spending endless hours doing tiny incremental tweaks on the previous one. Using a cassette 4-track recorder is easy. If you can press stop, play and record, you're pretty much there. When I finally did own my own 4-track, it was a Tascam 414. As I remember it, aside from stop and shuttle controls and record and play, I think you had a 2-band EQ, high and low, a bit of panning and a gain control. That was just about it. So it's super simple. And if you want using any outboard effects and bringing in the auxes, that's really all you had to play with. Now in 2024, looking at the screen of the average DAW, it looks a lot more complicated than a 4-track cassette recorder. It is a lot more complicated than a 4-track cassette recorder. There's a whole depth to it. There's so much to learn, so much you can do inside just a DAW. That's why I put together my free producer Kickstarter bundle that I mentioned earlier in this video. It's going to help you to kickstart your productions in 2024. But if you want to take them to the next level, I've also got a free 7-day trial of my all access pass. That's of all my courses, over 10 hours of home studio production tuition. You'll join the community over at realhomestudio.com academy, and you'll also get access to exclusive tuitional videos there too. Courses like the Virtual Console Pro. With that course, you're going to be working through an effective mix method, much like that in the 90s and of previous decades, but applying it to your modern 2024 home studio. The link for the free 7-day trial to the all access pass is below this video. Of course, don't forget to like and subscribe, but most importantly, go and have yourself a great day.